What he said wasn't what she heard, and it ended in blood asterisk. The shuttle's engines hummed their final note as Captain Alina Vasquez felt the gentle bump of landing. Through the viewport, she could see the impossible beauty of Zarian Prime stretching before her. The world defied every law of nature she knew. Purple oceans that floated in midair, crystalline forests that sang in harmonious tones, and cities that seemed to grow rather than be built. Her heart raced with excitement and terror in equal. Major Alina had volunteered for this mission not just because of her diplomatic training, but because she believed in the possibility of peace between humans and the Zarathi. The two species had been dancing around each other for months after first contact, neither fully trusting, both desperate to avoid the wars that had plagued human history as the shuttle doors opened. Warm air filled with the scent of exotic flowers and ozone washed over her. Waiting at the bottom of the landing ramp stood a figure that made her breath catch. Ambassador Kelter was tall and lean, his skin holding an opalescent quality that shifted between silver and deep blue, depending on the light. His eyes were the color of liquid mercury, and when he looked at her, she felt as though he could see straight through to her soul. "Welcome to Zarian Prime, Captain Vasquez," he said, his voice melodious and warm. The translation device at his throat converted his words into perfect English, though she noticed a slight delay, an occasional flicker of its status light. "Thank you, Ambassador Kelter." "I'm honored to be here," Alina replied, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. His touch sent an unexpected warmth up her arm. His skin was surprisingly soft, almost electric. As they walked through the landing area, Alina marveled at the Zarathi architecture. Buildings seemed to pulse with inner light, their walls flowing, like liquid mercury frozen in time. Gardens filled with impossible plants, some that glowed. Others that moved like gentle dancers in an unfelt breeze lined their path. "Your world is breathtaking," Alina said, trying to keep her diplomatic composure while internally gasping at the beauty around her. Kelter's expression shifted, something flickering across his features that the translation device seemed to miss entirely. "You honor us with your presence. Few humans have seen the inner cities." They approached a structure that seemed to be made entirely of living crystal, its walls shifting between transparency and opacity as they watched. "This is the council chamber," Kelter explained. "But first, would you join me for the evening meal? It is our custom to know those we negotiate with." Alina nodded, suddenly aware of how close he was walking beside her. There was something about his presence that made her feel both peaceful and electric at the same time. "I would be honored." The dining hall was intimate, lit by floating orbs of soft light that responded to their movements. They sat across from each other at a table that seemed to be carved from a single massive pearl. Servants brought dishes that defied description, foods that changed flavor with each bite, drinks that sparkled like liquid starlight. "Tell me about your world," Alina, Kelter said, and she noticed he'd dropped her title. Something about the way he said her name made her pulse quicken. "Earth is complicated," she began, then found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about her childhood by the ocean, her years in the diplomatic corps, her dreams of bridging the gap between species. As she spoke, she noticed the translation device on his throat flickering more frequently, but his eyes never left. "Hers and you?" she asked. "What drives the great Ambassador Kelter?" His mercury eyes seemed to darken. "Duty, honor, the weight of my people's expectations." Then, more quietly, and perhaps ... loneliness. The word hung between them like a confession. Alina felt her heart skip as she realized how much she understood that feeling. Here they were, two beings from different worlds, both carrying the weight of their people's hopes, both fundamentally alone in their responsibilities. "I understand," she whispered, and meant it. Kelter leaned forward slightly, his eyes searching hers. The translation device flickered again, its red warning light blinking briefly before returning to normal. Neither of them noticed, too caught up in the magnetic pull, drawing them together across the space between worlds. The evening air on Zarian Prime held a quality unlike anything Alina had ever experienced. It seemed to shimmer with energy, making her skin tingle as she walked beside Kelter through the bioluminescent gardens. The plants around them pulsed with soft light, responding to their presence like living mood rings, painting the night in blues and purples. "These gardens are sacred to my people," Kelter explained, his voice softer now, more intimate than it had been during their formal dinner. "We believe they reflect the emotional state of those who walk among them." Lena noticed the flowers around them were glowing warmer now, shifting toward golden hues. "What does that mean?" she asked, though part of her thought she might already know. "It means," he said, stopping beside a fountain where liquid light seemed to flow instead of water, "that you are not as composed as your diplomatic training suggests." She laughed, a sound that seemed to make the nearby plants pulse brighter. "Is it that obvious?" "To the gardens? Yes. To me?" He turned to face her fully, and in the shifting light, his opalescent skin seemed to glow from within. "I find myself hoping it is true." Alina felt her breath catch. Every diplomatic protocol she'd ever learned screamed warnings about getting personally involved with negotiation partners. But standing here in this impossible garden on an alien world, those protocols felt like distant whispers compared to the thundering of her heart. "Kelter," she began, but he stepped closer, close, enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "My name," he said quietly in my language, "means one who seeks. I have spent my life searching for purpose, for meaning beyond duty." His mercury eyes met hers. "I did not expect to find it in a human diplomat." The translation device at his throat flickered more persistently now, but Alina was too caught up in his proximity to notice. When he reached up to touch her face, his fingers tracing the line of her cheek, she leaned into the touch without thinking. "This is complicated," she whispered. "The most worthwhile things usually are," he replied, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It wasn't just physical, she could feel something deeper, as if their very souls were touching. Around them, the garden exploded into brilliant gold and silver light, the plants responding to the emotional resonance between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. The translation device on Kelter's throat was blinking, rapidly now displaying error messages neither of them could see in the garden's shifting light. "Alina," he said, and this time when the device translated her name, came out as something else entirely, a word in his language that meant beloved heart bond. She didn't understand the translation error, something in his tone made her pulse race even faster, as she whispered, not even sure what she was agreeing to, only knowing that whatever he was offering, she wanted it. They walked deeper into the gardens, fingers intertwined, talking in hushed voices about dreams and fears they'd never shared with anyone. Alina told him about the nightmares that haunted her after her first failed diplomatic mission, how she sometimes felt the weight of preventing war might crush her. Kelter spoke of the pressure of being the youngest ambassador in his peoples, history chosen not for experience, but for his ability to understand alien thought patterns. "My people," he said, as they sat beside a pool where luminescent fish swam in lazy circles, "we experience emotion differently than humans. It's more intense, more binding." "What do you mean?" Lena asked, though the way he was looking at her made her think she might not want to know the answer. "When we form attachments," he said carefully, "they are not easily broken. What you might call love, we call soul binding. It is permanent." Lena felt a chill despite the warm night air. "Are you warning me or promising me?" Kelter's expression grew troubled. "I am trying to be honest. What I feel for you, what is growing between us, if we continue down this path, there will be no going back. Not for me." She should have been frightened, should have remembered her training, her duty, the delicate peace negotiations that hung in the balance. Instead, she found herself moving closer to him, close enough to see her reflection in his mercury eyes. "Maybe," she said softly. "I don't want to go back." This time when he kissed her, it was with a desperation that spoke of months of loneliness, of duty without joy, of searching for something beyond the endless weight of expectation. Alina lost herself in it, in him, in the impossible beauty of an alien world that seemed to celebrate their connection with waves of golden light. Neither of them noticed the translation device's screen flickering with increasingly urgent error. Messages, or how their whispered endearments were being converted into words with entirely different meanings, words that in Zerathi culture carried the weight of eternal vows. Dawn on Zarian Prime painted the sky in shades of lavender and rose that had no names in any human language. Alina woke in her quarters with the taste of alien flowers still on her lips, and the memory of Kelter's touch burning on her skin. The night in the gardens felt like a dream. It's perfect and intense to be real. The chime at her door interrupted her reverie. When it opened, Kelter stood there, but something had changed. His usual composure seemed strained, his mercury eyes holding shadows she hadn't seen before. "Good morning," she said, moving toward him, expecting the warmth from the night before. Instead, he stepped back slightly, maintaining a formal distance that felt like a physical blow. "Captain Vasquez," he said, using her title and rank in a way that made her heart sink. "The High Council requests your presence for the final negotiations." Alina studied his face, searching for any sign of the man who had kissed her under starlight. "Kelter, about last night?" "We should not speak of personal matters," interrupted, but his voice carried a pain that matched her own. "Today, we determine the fate of our peoples." The walk to the council chamber passed in tense silence. Alina noticed other Zerathi looking at her strangely, some with what appeared to be excitement, others with barely concealed hostility. The translation device around Kelter's throat seemed to be working overtime, constantly flickering and adjusting. The High Council consisted of 12 of the most ancient and respected Zerathi, their opalescent skin having deepened to rich purples and deep blues with age. They sat in a circle around a crystalline table that pulsed with inner light, their expressions unreadable as Alina took her designated seat. Captain Vasquez, the eldest counselor, began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We understand you have made a formal bonding proposal to Ambassador Kelter." Alina's blood turned to ice. "I'm sorry, what?" Titor's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with something between horror and desperate hope. The translation device at his throat was blinking frantically now, red warning lights flashing in rapid succession. "Last night," another counselor continued, "in the sacred gardens, before the living witnesses of our most holy plants, you spoke the ritual words of eternal bonding. Ambassador Kelter accepted your proposal." "No," Alina said, standing. So quickly her chair scraped against the crystal floor. "No, that's not what happened. We talked, we kissed, but I never proposed anything." The translation device screeched, smoke beginning to pour from its circuits as it tried to process her words. But the damage was already done. Her denial filtered through the malfunctioning translator, came out as yes. "I claim this bonding with all my heart and soul." The council erupted in a cacophony of alien voices. Some seemed delighted, others outraged. Alina spun toward Kelter, desperate to make him understand, but his expression had shifted to something she couldn't read. "The translation device," she said urgently, pointing at the smoking mechanism at his throat. "It's been malfunctioning, can't you see? Nothing I said meant what you think it meant." But when her words emerged from the failing translator, they became, "I reject this bonding," and cast shame upon the ambassador's house. Kelter's face went completely white, his mercury eyes filling with a pain so deep it took Alina's breath away. Around them, the council members rose to their feet, their voices raised in what could only be anger. "You mock our most sacred traditions," the eldest counselor said, her voice like winter wind. "You offer bonding with one hand and rejection with the other. This is how humans treat diplomatic trust." "No," Alina shouted, but the device translated it as, "Yes, this is human treachery." The chamber fell silent except for the dying whine of the translation device finally giving up completely. Alina looked around at faces filled with betrayal and rage, then at Kelter, whose expression had shuttered completely. "I never meant... .. She began, but without the translator, her words fell into empty air, meaningless sounds to alien ears. Kelter spoke then, his voice carrying across the chamber in his own language. Alina couldn't understand the words, but she could hear the pain in them. The formal cadence of someone performing a duty that was breaking his heart. The council members began to file out. Their departure speaking volumes about the failure of The negotiations. Alina found herself alone with Kelter in the vast crystal chamber, the silence between them deeper than the void between their worlds. The translation device, she said desperately, knowing he couldn't understand but needing to try. It was broken. Everything I said, everything you heard, it wasn't what I meant. Kelter looked at her for a long moment, his mercury eyes reflecting her image back at her. Then he spoke a single word in his own language, something soft and final, before turning and walking away. Alina didn't need a translator to understand. In any language, goodbye sounded like heartbreak. Outside the chamber, she could hear the sounds of ships preparing for departure, of two species, once again retreating to their separate corners of the galaxy. The peace she had come to build lay in ruins around her, destroyed by words that had meant one thing in her heart and something entirely different in translation. But worse than the failure of diplomacy was the look in Kelter's eyes. The death of something beautiful before it had truly begun to live. The attack came at dawn, 3 days after the failed negotiations. Alina was in her temporary quarters, frantically working with her technical team to repair and analyze the broken translation device. When the first explosions shook the crystalline city, through her window, she could see ships descending from the sky, not the elegant flowing vessels of the Xerthi, but angular, aggressive craft that screamed hostility. Captain, Lieutenant Torres burst through her door, his face pale with urgency. "We're under attack." Xerthi military faction. They're calling it retaliation for the diplomatic insult. The insult that had never been intended. The rejection that had been nothing more than a machine's mistranslation. She grabbed her sidearm and communication device. "Get me a channel to Ambassador Kelter. Now." "Ma'am, the Xerthi government isn't responding to any human communications. We've declared us persona non grata. We have orders to evacuate immediately." Got another explosion. Closer this time, rattled the building. Through the crystalline walls, Alina could see the beautiful bioluminescent gardens where she and Kelter had shared their first kiss, now burning with unnatural fire. The sight filled her with a rage so pure it took her breath away. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Captain, that's a direct order from I'm not leaving without fixing this," she interrupted, already moving toward the door. That translation device didn't just fail, it was sabotaged. Someone wanted these negotiations to fail, wanted our peoples to go to war. Alina ran through corridors filled with fleeing diplomats and panicking staff, her mind racing. The device had been working perfectly during initial meetings, only starting to malfunction when she and Kelter began growing closer. Someone had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy everything. The city outside was chaos. Xerthi civilians fled in panic while military forces engaged the attacking ships. In the distance, Alina could see human evacuation shuttles lifting off, abandoning the planet in any hope of peace. But she ran toward the council chamber, toward the only person who might listen to her. She found Kelter in the crystal chamber, but he wasn't alone. 3 Xerthi in military uniforms surrounded him, their weapons drawn. His own people were holding him prisoner. Double quotes, ... betrayed our trust, one of them was saying in heavily accented English. Your foolish attachment to the human weakened you, made you blind to their deception. There was no deception, Kelter replied, his voice steady despite the weapons. Pointed at him. Alina would never... Alina, the military commander, spat, spoke the ritual words, then rejected them. In front of the High Council, she made our people appear foolish, weak. This insult demands blood. Alina stepped into the chamber, her weapon raised. The only insult here is your refusal to listen to the truth. The 3 Xerthi spun toward her, but Kelter was faster. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the nearest soldier and threw himself between Alina and the others. She came back, he said, wonder in his voice. You came back. I never left, Alina said, not taking her eyes off the remaining threats. And I never rejected you. Look at this. She pulled the broken translation device from her pocket. Its circuits clearly fried and tampered with. Someone sabotaged it, made it translate everything wrong. The military commander snarled something in Xerthi, raising his weapon, but Kelter moved like liquid lightning. The fight that followed was Brief and brutal, Alina had trained for combat, but watching Kelter move was like watching a deadly dance. His people were fast, but he was faster, driven by something beyond mere duty. When the three soldiers lay unconscious on the crystal floor, Kelter turned to Alina, his mercury eyes bright with hope and desperation. "The device you can prove. It was sabotaged." "More than that," Alina said, her fingers flying over her portable scanner. "I can prove who did it. The sabotage signature matches Zirathi technology, but it's been modified to look like human work. Someone on both sides wanted this war." Outside, the sounds of battle grew closer. Through the crystal walls, they could see human and Zirathi forces, engaged in deadly combat, ships falling from the sky like burning stars. "We have to stop this," Alina said. How Kelter moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. "Our peoples are already at war. Blood has been spilled on both sides." Alina looked at him, at this alien man who had somehow become the most important person in her universe in the span of just a few days. "Together," she said, "we stop it together." Kelter's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as naturally as if they'd been doing it for years instead of days. "If we try this, if we reveal the sabotage, the military factions on both sides will see us as traitors. Then we'd better be very convincing," Alina said, squeezing his hand. Around them, the crystal chamber began to pulse with soft light, responding to their emotional connection. "Because I'm not losing you to someone else's war? Not when I just found you, Alina," he said, his voice soft with wonder. "In my language, there is a word. Kethmata. It means soul, who completes soul. I thought it was just poetry until I met you." "I don't care what language you say it in," she replied, raising their joined hands to press his palm against her cheek. "I understand." Outside, the war raged on. But inside the crystal chamber, two hearts from different worlds beat in perfect synchronization, ready to fight for a peace that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with love. The communication array atop the highest spire of the Zirathi capital had never been used for what Alina and Kelter were about to attempt. As they climbed the spiraling crystal steps, explosions from the battle below sent shockwaves through the structure, making it sing like a massive wind chime. "Are you certain this will work?" Kelter asked, his voice tight with strain as he carried the jury-rigged broadcast equipment Alina had assembled from the broken translation devices. "I'm certain it's our only chance," Alina replied, pausing to catch her breath on the endless stairs. "If we can broadcast the evidence of sabotage simultaneously to both fleets, show them they're fighting each other's war instead of their own. The military commanders on both sides will try to silence us the moment they realize what we're doing," Selter warned. Alina looked back at him, this alien man who had somehow become her anchor in a universe gone mad. His opalescent skin was pale with exhaustion, but his mercury eyes burned with determination. "Then we'd better talk fast." They reached the communication chamber as another wave of fighters screamed overhead, human and Zirathi craft locked in deadly combat. Elena's hands flew over the broadcasting controls while Kelter interfaced with the Zirathi systems, different technologies somehow harmonizing under their combined effort. Elena, Kelter said softly. "If this doesn't work, it will work," she said firmly, then looked up from the equipment. "But if it doesn't, I want you to know everything I felt in that garden, everything that got lost in translation. It was real. You are real to me." Kelter's hand covered hers on the control panel. "In my culture, we believe that souls recognize each other across any distance, any difference. I recognized you the moment you stepped off that shuttle, and let's make sure our souls get to spend more than a few days together," Elena said, activating the broadcast array. The signal went out simultaneously on all frequencies, human and Zirathi, cutting through military communications and emergency channels alike. Alina and Kelter appeared on screens throughout both fleets, their images transmitted from the crystal spire that pulsed with light behind them. "This is Captain Alina Vasquez of the Human Diplomatic Corps," Alina began, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "And Ambassador Kelter of the Zirathi High Council," Kelter added, his words automatically translated by the repaired broadcast system. "We are broadcasting evidence of sabotage that has driven our peoples to war under false pretenses," Lena continued, uploading the data they had compiled. The translation devices were deliberately corrupted to create misunderstandings, to turn words of friendship into insults, to make peace impossible. On screens throughout both fleets, the evidence played out, technical readouts showing the sabotage, recordings of the actual conversations with correct translations. Proof that extremist factions on both sides had conspired to ensure war. The rejection you heard was never spoken, Kelter said, his eyes fixed on the camera. The insults that were translated never existed in her heart. We have been fighting each other's ghosts. For a moment, the battle seemed to pause. Alina could see ships hovering uncertainly, commanders processing the information, flooding their screens. Then the communication array began picking up transmissions, angry voices from military leaders on both sides, demands to shut down the broadcast, orders to destroy the spire. "They're coming for us," Alina said, watching the tactical display as ships from both fleets converged on their location. "Let them come," Kelter said, moving to stand beside her. "Some truths are worth dying for." But before the ships could reach them, something extraordinary happened. Other voices began joining the broadcast, human crew members recognizing Elena's evidence, Zirathi civilians who had witnessed the sabotage, moderate leaders from both sides who had suspected the truth all along. The communication channels filled with overlapping voices, all saying the same thing. The war was a lie. One by one, ships began standing down. Human vessels powered down their weapons. Zirathi craft ceased their attacks. In the space between worlds, two fleets that had been locked in deadly combat began the delicate process of backing away from annihilation. Alina and Kelter watched from their crystal spire as peace negotiations began again. This time with the saboteurs exposed and removed from power. But more than that, they watched as understanding spread between their peoples, not just political understanding, but the recognition that love could exist across any boundary, that souls could recognize each other regardless of the shape of their bodies or the color of their skin. "So what happens now?" Alina asked as the last of the hostile ships retreated. "Now," Kelter said, pulling her into his arms as the crystal spire sang with harmonious light around them, "we build something new. Not just peace between our peoples, but a bridge built on truth instead of translation, on understanding instead of assumption." Alina looked out at the stars, where human and Zirathi ships were forming joint patrols, where the first steps toward genuine alliance were being taken. And us? What happens to us? Kelter's smile was radiant as he kissed her, the crystal chamber erupting in golden light that could be seen from orbit. "We become the story they tell their children," he said. "The human and the Zirathi who loved each other enough to save two worlds." Years later, when peace had become so natural that few remembered the brief war, Alina and Kelter spawned would indeed become legend, not just as a political alliance, but as proof that some connections transcend species, that some loves are strong enough to rewrite the fate of worlds, and that sometimes what sounds like an ending is really just the beginning of something beautiful. In the end, it wasn't what he said or what she heard that mattered. It was what they chose to build together from the ashes of misunderstanding. A love that spoke all languages and needed no translation at all.